Today is all about topwater bass fishing. It is the end of May, and pretty much from here all the way to the end of the year, I'm probably going to have a topwater on the front deck of my boat. I absolutely love fishing a topwater. Now, I actually decided to ask AI what the top 10 most asked questions are when it comes to topwater fishing, and they were pretty legit questions. So in this video, we're gonna try to answer those top 10 questions. But before we get into it, this video is brought to you by Fin Fishing, which is my apparel company. Right now over at Fin Fishing, I am running a package deal for the month of May. So for about another week, you can actually get a USA made sun shirt and a duck hat like the one that I'm wearing right here for $75. So you save about 20%, almost 20% on the whole order, and it is one of the best ways to help support this channel. So I'm gonna leave some links down below. I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's talk about topwater bass fishing. I got 10 questions here. I'm gonna grab my laptop here and start going through them. Now, number one, when is the best time to fish a topwater? Now, like I just said in the intro of this video, really, me personally, I pick a topwater up a lot kind of around the spawn time of the year, and I'm gonna fish it throughout the rest of the year. Now, I don't always know when the best topwater bite is going to happen, when I'm going to experience some of the best topwater bites, but I have seen that over the years, there are a few times that it seems like it always happens. Now, one is the immediate post-spawn. Right as soon as the bass get off the beds, I always feel like there is a decent topwater bite, and that's why I have a topwater rigged up right now, because I'm throwing it right now. But also, one of the best times that I think, probably the best time throughout the year, is actually in the fall. I think that the fall is an underrated, great topwater time. Like, I throw a topwater all the time in the fall. Sometimes it's the only thing that I will throw. But also, there's times throughout the summer. I mean, early summer mornings, late summer mornings, sometimes all day in the summer can be great. So I never say never to a topwater. I always at least try it. However, there are some bad times to throw a topwater. For example, after cold fronts can be really, really bad times. When you have big changes in the wind. For example, I've seen on certain lakes where you have a lot of west winds, and if it all of a sudden changes to the east winds, it just seems like you get a lot less topwater bites, and they miss a lot of them. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about fish that miss topwaters here in a minute, but I always try to keep a topwater honest throughout the year, because it seems like if you can catch fish on a topwater, they tend to be better than average. You tend to get some really big fish on topwater, so I almost never say never to a topwater. All right, let's get on to question number 2. What are the best topwater lures for bass? And as you guys probably would expect me to answer, I do not think that there is one that is better than another. When it comes to a lot of topwaters, there are some very popular topwaters: walking style baits, buzz baits, ploppers, poppers are really good, wake baits. Those are some of the biggest topwaters that we have. Frogs, obviously. There's not necessarily a topwater that is better than the other one. There are just ones that work a little bit better for certain situations. You know, if I'm fishing around a lot of matted vegetation and slop, pretty much the only topwater that I can go with in that situation is some sort of frog. So in that situation, I'm gonna say a frog. Now, if I have a little bit more sparse grass that kind of comes up to the surface, still I may not be able to use a treble hooked bait, but sometimes a bait like a horny toad reeled across the surface actually is better than a frog. And so really this comes down a little bit to experimentation. Every time that you go out there, if you can get on a topwater bite, usually I start experimenting to see how fish are getting them. I've also seen times out there where bass do like a popper over a walking bait or a walking bait over a popper. I throw those two baits in a lot of the exact same situations, but it just seems like some days they like one or another. But again, I can't say, hey, this is where I like to do this and this is where I like to do this, because there's a lot of times out there where the bass like both of them the exact same. Now, there are a couple of times throughout the year where it seems like I really like a buzz bait. And I'm gonna talk about that here in just a moment. But let's go ahead and get on to number 3, which is what kind of rod, reel, and line should I use with my top waters? So when it comes to top waters, I pretty much fish all top waters except for like bigger plopper style baits and frogs on the same rod. And that's this rod right here. This is an ARC Invoker Pro Series rod, Invoker Tour. It is a 7-foot 2-inch rod. It is it's actually not a glass rod or composite rod. It's a graphite rod, but it has a more of a moderate bend, or as they call it on the website, a regular bend. And so the thing about it, when you're using a bait that has treble hooks, you hear me say this all the time on this channel, I like to have more of a moderate bending rod. Now, typically, I like composite rods for a lot of treble hook baits. Baits like, crank baits, for example. But with a top water, you are working a top water a lot. It's very similar to a jerk bait. You're constantly working a top water a lot. And using a composite rod, which tend to have a little bit more fiberglass in them, which makes them heavier, it just gets a little like tiresome on your hands. Now you can do it and you're not going to lose very many fish, but it just gets a little tiresome. So I really like a graphite rod. I really like a 7-foot to 7-foot 2-inch rod because I like a little bit extra length there to make a long cast. And then when it comes down to the reel and the line, the reel, I like something in the 7 range. This is a 7.1-to-1 gear ratio. You may be able to step it up to an 8.1-to-1 gear ratio. And I've always liked 30-pound braid to typically a 20-pound monofilament leader. Now I know that sounds pretty heavy for a lot of guys, but I have used a 20-pound mono leader for a number of years. I actually just used to use straight 20-pound monofilament, and I have had a ton of success with that. I have an absolute ton of success with that. So that is what I use. I have no issues. As far as the leader goes, if you look here, I keep the leader very, very, very short. It's only about 1.5 feet right there. And sometimes if that even gets down to 6 inches, I'm fine with that. The only reason that I put a leader on a lot of my top waters is to keep the braided line out of that first treble. If this is straight braid, it'll get wrapped around that first treble all the time, and it's just really, really an issue. And so putting that small monofilament leader on there, it really helps keep that line out of the treble hook, and I'm able to have a clean cast all the time. So this is my setup with a lot of wake baits, walking baits, pop bar style baits. This is what I use. Now, when it comes to a plopper, again, I like braided line, but I actually do use a composite rod. And personally, I like my chatterbait rod, which is a 7-foot 4-inch composite rod. The reason that I like my chatterbait rod is a plopper, you don't typically work, right? You cast it out, you pretty much reel it in. Every now and then I'm gonna kill the bait, but I'm not working the bait. So in that situation, I like the length, and I also like that composite, again, that really moderate action. So on that rod, I'm gonna have usually 30 to 40 pound braid, and you're pretty much good to go with that as far as the plopper goes. A buzzbait, I like braid 30-pound line, but I pair it with my spinnerbait rod, which is like a 7-foot 1-inch medium heavy power fast action in that situation. So, and then when it comes down to the frog, a frog is almost the same as that buzz bait, and you could probably use the exact same rod with both, absolutely. But with a buzz bait, I tend to like 30-pound braid. With a frog, when I'm fishing it around really heavy cover, I tend to step up to about 50-pound braid. I like a little bit longer rod, a 7-foot 3-inch rod. So that is typically all of my top water setups and what I do with them. Now on the plopper, on the buzzbait, on the frog, no leaders. That is straight braid on those. All right, let's get on to number 4, which is how do I know when to set the hook on a top water? This is actually a pretty elementary, but also very, very good question, because you would think at times that you just set the hook when you see a fish blow up on your top water. But that is a mistake, one that I have made a million times over my life. So when I'm working a lot of treble hooked topwater baits, the biggest thing that you can do is just continue to work that bait until you feel the load of the rod. You know, if I'm working a walking style bait, chew, 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 I'm literally just, if a fish is hitting it, I just keep working it. When I start to feel it, when I start to literally feel the weight of the fish, I just pull into them. And it's not a hard hook set, it's just kind of a pull set. And that's the best thing that you can do, because what happens sometimes is bass get bad about missing a topwater. They'll come up there, slap at that bait 3 or 4 times before they actually get it. And if you set the hook right away when that fish first hits it and that bait goes flying out of the water, he is not likely to come back there and hit it unless he's super aggressive and there's a lot of fish around. But if it's just one single fish and you keep working that bait, he may come back 3, 4, 5 times before he finally gets it. So the best thing that I do with most treble hooked topwater baits, just keep working it until you feel the load of it. Now with a popper style bait, with a plopper style bait and with a buzz bait, it's kind of the same, but all I'm doing is reeling both of those baits most of the time. So I'm just gonna reel it until I feel, again, that tap on my rod. When I feel it load up, I pull back with the popper or with the plopper rod. With the buzz bait, I might give them a little bit more just because it's a single hooked bait, but that's still very similar. Now on a frog and a toad style bait, when a fish comes up there and gets it, similar thing, you can kind of keep working the bait. I also tend to just let the fish have it. You know, if you watch some of my old videos that I've done over on BassFishingHQ, I actually did this one where I let a bass eat my topwater frog and then I showed you how long he would hold on to it. And I counted, I think, to like 9 or 10 or 11 seconds, and then I set the hook, and that fish held on to that frog the whole time. So fish will hold on to frogs and they will hold on to toads for a while. So it's not good if you set the hook right away. It's better to just give them a second to get that bait before you set the hook. All right, moving on to the next question. Why are bass missing my topwater? This is a phenomenal question. Sometimes when it comes to topwater fishing, there are little things that you can do to really help you increase the odds of bass getting your bait. For example, I've seen days where I'm throwing a walking style topwater bait like this, and bass are bad about missing the bait. Seen it a lot with smallmouth. And sometimes simply switching from a walking bait to a popper style bait, those fish will start committing to that popper because the popper is a lot smaller. Now, also, I have seen days where if you put on a feathered treble hook, like what I have right here, or take it off, that can also make a difference on fish actually getting the bait and missing the bait. So those are a couple of things that I always like to do to try to increase my odds. The other thing that you should know though is that there are just days out there on the water where bass are bad about missing it. They truly are just terrible at missing your bait. And I see this a lot more with smallmouth than I do with largemouth. And when it comes to smallmouth, sometimes if they just continue to miss my bait, or maybe I'm hooking up with like 1 out of every 3 fish that try to hit it, a lot of times I'll just switch over to a different bait. One of the baits that it comes to my mind is a fluke. You know, sometimes when you're on a good walking style topwater bite, but they're missing it, you switch over to like a fluke, work it just below the surface, and those fish will come up there and actually eat the whole thing. You can give it to them for a second and then set the hook. So sometimes switching up your baits really helps. Sometimes changing your colors really helps too. And we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But a lot of times there are days where they just are missing it. There's not much that you can do. So you just got to try to fish a different bait of some sort. All right. Shoot, did I just exit out of my sheet? Okay, it's back. Can I use topwater lures all day? This is definitely a big misconception when it comes to topwater fishing. Topwaters are great typically in the mornings, in the evenings, and also in cloudy conditions. Those are the times that guys know that a topwater is good. But yes, 100%. There are certain fisheries, especially clear water fisheries, where it seems like bass in the post spawn and bass throughout the day or bass in shade pockets, and definitely in the fall, bass will hit a topwater bait all day. So do not think that you can only get a topwater bite in the morning. Sometimes it is better in the morning, but sometimes bass will hit that topwater all day long, especially in very clear water. I don't know what it is about muddy water that sometimes makes them not want to bite the topwater in the middle of the day, but it just seems like that is the experience that I've had. All right, going on to number 7. What is the best retrieve for a topwater bait? Now, every topwater out there, you work a little bit differently. The biggest thing that I can say when it comes to every single topwater though out there, even if it's baits like a buzz bait and a plopper where you think you're just mostly just reeling that bait in, is always add in a pause, like 1, 2, 3 times in a cast. And do this with every single topwater that you fish. You know, even a walking bait, which most guys cast out there and it's just a cadence like 2, 2, 2, 2. About 2, 3 times throughout the cast, just kill the bait. Absolutely kill the bait. Same thing with the plopper. Same thing. You can't really do this with a buzz bait, but you can pop a buzz bait. And that's, again, the big thing that I'm trying to do here is change up my cadence to try and make a bass commit to it, because there's a lot of times that we can't see that bass are following your topwater, and if you change up the pace, maybe you go a little bit faster, maybe you kill it, maybe you pop a buzz bait, whatever it may be, that little change in the bait forces bass at times to eat it. And so no matter what topwater bait I'm throwing, sure, you can kind of have that same cadence and keep doing it, but try to add in a little bit something different 2 or 3 times to a cast. Kill it, pop it a little bit harder, walk it a little bit quicker, 2, 3 times a cast. I'm telling you, that will help. That could increase your bites by 2, or even more. I've seen days on the water where that is the only way that they will bite it. If I'm working that popper and I pop, pause it, that's when they get it. So just always try to vary your retrieve on the way in. Where should I throw topwater lures for a bass? This is a question kind of like we got yesterday with a jig. You can throw a topwater in so many different situations, but I will say, unless you are fishing kind of in the Carolinas for bass, and I'll get to that in a minute, most of the time I am targeting bass that are in less than about 10 foot of water. And I'm not saying the bass won't come up from 10, 12 foot of water to get your topwater bait, but I throw topwaters most of the time in fairly shallow water and around a lot of cover, you know, whether that's grass or stumps or laydowns or whatever it may be. I'm throwing a topwater around cover. Now, the reason that I said the Carolinas is that in the Carolinas, there's a unique bait fish called a blueback herring. I've actually been fortunate enough to fish several different blueback herring lakes. Bluebacks are very different in nature because of what they do. And bass on blueback lakes, one, are typically really clear water lakes, and those fish will come from 30 foot down to get a topwater bait. And I have seen it so many times. It is the most incredible thing ever. When they are on a good topwater bite, you can literally cast the brush piles that are sitting in 25, 30 foot of water, and you will watch those fish rocket off of that brush pile. I mean like a missile. It is the coolest thing ever. But for most of the time, I'm fishing my bait in 10 foot of water or less and around cover. All right, let's go on to the next one. What color topwaters work best? We talked about this a little bit the other day in a video, but we were talking about frogs, I believe. The big thing when it comes to topwater colors is that just remember a bass can only really see the bottom of them. They can really only see the bottom. Now, I really like a white color that I will throw out there some days, especially when the bass really like shad. I typically fish a white a little bit more on cloudy days. I like a translucent color, meaning that you can see through it. If I'm fishing really clear water on a sunny day, I'm gonna fish a translucent color. I also like black. Black can be good in all different types of topwaters. Black is a weird color to me though, because I have gotten on really good baits on a black topwater in the middle of the day in crystal clear water, in sunny conditions, as well as really cloudy conditions. So to me, I don't know. It's just weird. I don't always think topwater colors matter a whole lot, because if you are in the water and you're looking down at a bait, the difference between black and white is actually a lot less than what you would think, because they all kind of just silhouette with what the light that is behind them. The only other topwater bait I might throw a little bit is like a frog one. Sorry, not a frog, a bluegill colored one. If I'm fishing around fish that are eating a lot of bluegill, I do like a little bit of orange on the throat. I do think that the bass, they can kind of see the whole red spectrum pretty well. So I feel like they can see orange pretty well. And so I do at times like a little bit of orange or red on the throat of a bait. And those are pretty much the only colors that I'm going to throw. All right. This is the last question. Yep, question number 10. Can you fish a topwater in cold water? And the answer is yes. Then it kind of depends on the cold water that you're fishing. I will say the further up north that you live in the country, the colder the water you can get bit on with a topwater. If you live a little bit more down in the south or in more stable weather conditions, those fish typically like water temps that are probably about 55, 56 before they start eating a topwater. Up here in Ohio, we're a little bit more on the northern side, and I have caught bass on buzz baits in 47-degree water before, like caught them really good in that water degree temperature, actually when it was snowing. And so that also, it happens to be one of my favorite topwater, cold water topwater baits, is a buzz bait. Now, the only trick with using a buzz bait in cold water is use a light head, 1/4 ounce head with a big blade. Basically, you are wanting to creep that thing across the surface. You're not ripping it across the surface, you are creeping it across the surface. So guys, I hope that answers a lot of questions when it comes to topwater fishing. Please let me know if you have any more down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.